Good morning, story trading folks. It's Thursday, March 16th, and we have a lot to cover. Okay, hold on. Let me just change that background. You barely see it, but it bothers me. Okay, so listen, we just had employment numbers come out. They were better than expected, but the market didn't really react, and expectations for rates didn't really change because no one is looking at that anymore. Everyone is thinking that the decision the Fed makes next week is going to be based on the banking crisis. And also, we have an ECB decision coming up in 15 minutes. We might actually switch to that live and show you that press conference here at 9:15 a.m. Now, meanwhile, you can see market's not in great shape right now. And I think that's mostly because the First Republic Bank worries about the banking crisis continuing. And also, there was a statement out by the ECB that some banks are at risk over there. Some banks are vulnerable. That just came out like 10 minutes ago. And that's when FAS started taking off. That's a triple short the financials. And the market turned down QQQ and SPY, but I think a lot is going to rest on what the ECB decides here in just about 15 minutes time. Meanwhile, these are the three hedges I'm in, actually four. I'm in all of these: gold, TLT, Bitcoin, and FAS. And right now it looks like, wow, that was the right decision, Ben. But the whole thing, I could be completely wrong 10 minutes from now. If the ECB, hikes by 20, 50 bips, if they hike by 50 bips, you probably see gold and TLT crashing. And FAS might still do good with a big interest rate hike. We'll see. But gold and TLT really interest rate sensitive. So we'll see if that's going to work out. Now, really, you got to watch FRC. Look at these regional banks back down in the gutter. They're trading like shit coins. Excuse my language. FRC almost hit its low of the other morning. This morning went below 20 before the 7 a.m. pre-market here. Monday morning it bottomed at like 18 or so. Now we're at 21, 22. They're clearly in distress. They're clearly trying to either sell assets or sell the company. And if that goes under, I don't know, man. I do think this is over. Listen, I've spent a dozen hours listening to lots of smart people about this, and it's not 2008, it's not 2009. There's not counterparty risk, but on the other hand, it's a different type of problem. It's a different type of problem with so much leverage in the system. The banks obviously cannot pay you if everyone went and demanded their money back today. Even JP Morgan can't pay you. So this is a crisis of confidence. It's something that's having contagion based on sentiment, right? It's not a contagion like in 2008-9 based on counterparty risk. It's a sentiment contagion. And you have the headlines, you have social media, people see that additional banks are going under. You can start seeing distress all over the world. And I started seeing reports of Chinese banks now, and runs on banks are potentially happening all over the world right now. And it's a very unstable situation. So I'm not like very excited about this. I sold off like, and so far, maybe it was the wrong move, but over the last few days, I sold off like 20% of my IRA, and I put it in bonds and gold, and even some Bitcoin for the first time in my IRA. So that's where I'm at. And interestingly enough, though, the QQQ has been very, very, very strong. I have to admit it. Technically, look at this. It's over the 20 DMA, and we'll look at, actually, let me just flip to the stocks we talked about yesterday. Remember, yesterday morning, we gave you a list of the stocks that were outperforming the most. So are they starting with Microsoft? Now, Microsoft, Meta, Crowd, NVIDIA, PanW, we gave you all of these stocks yesterday morning after a night of long research. I was going back and looking at all the stocks we covered in the past 2 months, and I picked out those 5 mega caps as the ones that had the best relative strength and the best reactions post-catalyst, and they all exploded yesterday after initially being down, especially in Microsoft and ChatGPT for catalyst, Meta on catalyst of potentially banning TikTok. All right, we'll get back to those individual stocks in a second. But let's just finish up over here. So a little bit, I'm not buying it, man. I know the technicals are saying QQQ is good. To me, I want to see the Fed go to zero. And this is the whole thing. Are they going to pause, or are they going to do 25 bips? And it seems the consensus is 25 bips. It seems the consensus this morning for ECB is at least 25 bips. Even some are saying 50 bips still on the table for ECB. And I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around why the NASDAQ would rally if people are still expecting rate increases. So I don't have a full understanding of what's going on, to be honest with you, because I've been avoiding NASDAQ, I've been avoiding risk assets, and I'm piling in, as I said, into gold, TLT, etc., because I'm looking for the Fed to pivot to zero to get the all clear. And if they don't, I don't know, man. I think more things are going to break. I think you're going to see more runs on banks if even if the ECB raises by 25 bips. The system is going to look for all of the weak banks and try to run them all into the ground if the Fed keeps raising interest rates. That's my opinion. Could be wrong. But in any case, regional banks don't look safe, don't look investable to me right now. You can see it's not only FRC, but it's WAL, it's PacWest, it's Bank of Hawaii, Zion, all of these under distress right now. And you can look at the regional bank index here, KRE. I mean, what's going to happen, right? Is the Fed going to backstop all the deposits for all these regional banks? They haven't explicitly said that. What's going to happen? Are people going to send all their deposits to JP Morgan and Citibank, and that's it? And you just have 4 large banks? You don't know. I mean, this is still all very much in flux, and Bank of America, obviously. So I'm still very hesitant about this market. And again, maybe I've been wrong to be hesitant because I missed out, for example, on Microsoft. I do have some calls on Microsoft, which is nice. But last week, I sold Microsoft and some other things in my IRA in order to buy more TLT and gold. So we'll see. Jury's out, but I don't love this market. Now to individual stocks. This morning, you know what we do? We follow 300 stocks and we look at the catalysts to see if there's any re-rating opportunities or any inflection points, any kind of news that will cause inflection points. So there was news out on AirG, RELL, we'll talk about in a second, SENS, GIII, Apron, APRN, FREY. The reason they're not on the top of my list is because I was not impressed by any of those press releases. AirG maybe has something interesting there, but still, I'm not impressed by time to focus on them. The only one out of those that I thought was, let me mention, is RELL, and that's more so because we mentioned it yesterday that it was near the 200 DMA, and it bounced off the 200 DMA, and they have a press release here with a distribution agreement with NVTS, and again, I don't know if it's going to move the needle for Richardson today, but it's a piece of good news, and it's talking about silicon carbide and gallium nitrate. Is that what it's called? Gallium nitride. So, and NVTS, I never knew about this. So I put this on my watch list now. This is something, semiconductor company in the right kind of spaces and hot spaces. And look at this chart. It's been doing really well the last 6 months, up from $3 to $6 the last 3 months. It's doubled in 3 months. So that's now on our radar, NVTS. Thanks to RELL, and RELL, solid company, holding in my IRA, right at 200 DMA support. Also want to talk about a couple other stocks that had news this morning, which I think were much better. DXLG, they beat. You see that? 13 cent beat 10 cents. And if you look at the guidance for 2023, it was good guidance as well. Revenue coming in above expectations. EPS was, though, for the year, about in line. But here's the other thing. They also had a $15 million stock buyback in here. So overall, net good news, but I'm not going to jump on it. Don't think this is something that's like a rapid re-rating, but it's bouncing off the 200 DMA and could be a good company, could be something you guys want to look into, but not something I'm going to play today. ARLO, thank you, Julian. We talked to you about this yesterday because after the big catalyst, it had relative strength over the 200 DMA. They came out with news to this morning, surpasses 2 million paid subscribers. They already said that in the press release of earnings that they're going to pass 2 million next week. So it's not really new, but it's good to see. Nice to see a press release on it and nice to see this move. It didn't even touch the 200 DMA. So ARLO looks like one of the solid companies we talked about yesterday. And like I said, those solid companies we talked about yesterday were really outperforming like crazy. You can see right now, they're all bouncing back green. Okay, now let me take a few minutes to talk about XXII, LLAP. First, Clearfield, though. Clearfield, very, very close. I think the risk reward is pretty good here, right? Like you might miss it if you look for, let me wait for a touch of 44. Let me wait for the RSI to go to 27 on the weekly. Maybe it gets there. But I think it's probably a good time to start nibbling on Clearfield, in my opinion. And of course, no guarantees in the stock market. But risk reward wise, look, this thing is 135. Now it's 44, pretty low PE. And there's reason to believe that this will go back into like growth mode second half of the year. So eyes on Clearfield. Looks like maybe it's time to start nibbling on that stock. XXII, we interviewed the CEO yesterday. A nice audience showed up, and man, lots of people. If you go to the stock twits board, you'll see lots and lots of notes on XXII interview over there. Now public, of course, the interview is not public, but people posting it. It looks like people are really, really happy. We asked them hard-hitting questions, and it looks like people are very, very satisfied with the answers. And maybe that's going to be enough. It seems like enough people are watching that video and now talking about it on StockTwits. Maybe that's enough to kind of put a floor on the stock here. We mentioned it's a triple support. Thank you, Matt S., for pointing that out. So long-term prospects looks good on XXII. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. LLAP, earnings are on Tuesday. So remember, we had this play looking for 225. It went to 220. That's a 20 DMA. Now pulled back, bouncing off the 50 DMA again. But I'm just going to note here, research I've been doing at the ITU website, it does look increasingly likely that the decision to give an approval or rejection on the Rivada Space Networks project is going to be deferred till June. Not necessarily, but it seems like it's getting more likely because it seems, I don't know. I'm not going to go to the details here, but I did the details are available on ITU website. Here's the deal. Rivada did submit in time the application, and I believe it is on the agenda. From everything you can see on the ITU website, it is on the agenda for the ITU meeting next week, March 20th to March 24th. But you also had 2 late submissions, one by Germany, one by France. Germany asking the ITU to delay making a decision until June. Now, the fact that they're asking them to delay means that they expect this M1 waiver to be approved. Otherwise, why would they ask for a delay? That's like, okay, go to the ITU and get rejected. So this application is solid that Rivada put in, and it's likely to get approved. So Germany, which is probably representing, we're guessing, the other aggrieved party, the Chinese shareholders of the company Rivada bought to buy the spectrum, there's a legal dispute there. Maybe they're representing those group of investors, right? They're coming out and say, well, have a comment period, and then he can review it in June. So I don't know if that argument's going to fly. It might, right? And then France also filed something which wasn't trying to derail the approval, but just saying that there's other considerations. We have to coordinate French satellites with the Rivada satellites and just keep all this in mind as you go through the approval process, something like that. So there's a whole bunch of complexities there, which, and we did talk to investor relations last week, and they even told us that it's either going to be in March or June. It's not guaranteed to happen in March. So, all right. So that catalyst, maybe that news is spreading and it's keeping the stock from going up, but I still think you get some sort of event anticipation into the event on Tuesday. So I'm not really keen on selling right here at 198 too. But I do want to reduce my position maybe as we get closer to 225 again in the next couple of days. Okay. Now, man, Microsoft and ChatGPT, that was incredible. I lost my IRA shares last week to buy TLT, but I did buy some calls yesterday, kept some of those calls overnight. So this thing looks great, right? It's just hard. Given the banking crisis, it's really hard to be in these stocks. You have this nice W pattern. If I'm just looking at these technicals and I didn't know what else was happening in the world, and I said this yesterday morning, I said I'd slam Microsoft today, right? And that would have been a huge decision. And I did a little bit with calls, but not hard enough, right? So this thing looks like it's headed to 272 or higher. It does. Looks really strong over key moving averages on the daily, on the weekly. Very strong positive news on ChatGPT 4 and the implications for Bing and market share. All that very good. Meta, we also talked about yesterday, and I told you yesterday. I think this. I told last few days. Actually, someone was asking me about this chart the other day. Like this thing looks like it's going to 229, and that was when the stock was like 185, and it's just keep going and going, right? It's like, so these individual charts look good if you can wall that off in your mind from what's going on with the ECB crisis. Now, I have a hard time doing that. I'm giving you the analysis, and if you can execute without letting the other stuff impact you, great. For me, it does impact me, and I'm like, I just don't want to be in stocks right now with what's going on, and I'm missing out on these opportunities. But as I said yesterday, these are things you can tuck away in your IRA, I think. Microsoft, Meta, crowdsourced, NVIDIA, PanW. If you're not looking to make a quick trade, you just tuck them away. It's so interesting. Every time we have a long-term outlook, like, hey, these are great stocks. Look at the recent catalysts. It's good for the long term. They end up doing great, like in the immediacy, in that day or two, because I guess everyone else sees the same thing. Okay. In any case, also YEXT and LAZR, we pointed out, all of these ended up having strong days yesterday. LAZR bouncing off support. And these are the stocks we're monitoring that we think are all in good shape. I did mention Tesla and Air and Exact Sciences and Mobileye and Scorpio, not as good. I called them resilient. Not as great charts as the ones above. And Scorpio now with oil tanking and recession looming, that really took a hit, bouncing off the 50 DMA. So be careful of any oil services stocks. And let's go to Lagarde here, I think.
Step. Deposit rate, goes from 2.5 to 3. Let's get to Steve Lee.
Wow, 0.5%. Oh, say goodbye to my TLT
Carl, it is
gold.
50 across all 3 different benchmarks of the European Central Bank. So I will tell you this, that we went into this thing.
What is going on with the rest of the market? That's not good for Faz.
All morning, the probabilities, we went into it with a 65% probability of a 25 based on comments that were made just before the number came out, or the decision came out from the ECB vice president about concern about the banking system, that suddenly led people to believe that all of a sudden the ECB might go 25, but they're projecting ahead. And I've got a few more headlines here. I'm looking at the
they want to break the system more,
comments here from the elevated level of uncertainty, reinforcing the importance of
FRC's
a data-dependent approach for the ECB, which is interesting. And they'll say it's going to be determined by an assessment of the inflation outlook in light of new data. So they're kind of taking future rate hikes, it seems to me, in these comments here and making them a little bit uncertain. Now, I want to check what's happened with U.S. markets and interest rates across the board. The 2-year, we went into this at 393, up a few basis points. It looks like to me at 397. I'll give you an actual print on that as soon as it updates here in front of me here.
I guess the banking it looks like not enough to kill inflation.
Sorry, 357. We went in at 350. So anyway, up a few basis points, and it looks like futures as well down a little bit. It seems to me we went in minus 17 at the S&P. Now we're minus 25. So the market had wanted a little bit less from the ECB. Now it's giving it a little bit more, with the big question, what is the ricochet on the Federal Reserve here? And I'm going to need to look down a little bit, take a look at my Fed funds futures, and it seems to me that they are a little bit lower here. It looks like to me 382 on the year end, 486 on the peak rate here. So again, building in more Fed rate hikes. Why? Because of the idea that perhaps the ECB might do more. We've got a comment here, I think we might, from a former Boston Fed president, Eric Rosengren, who's one of 2 Fed officials who have been former Fed officials who have been speaking out. And Eric Rosengren decidedly saying that the Federal Reserve ought to pause. Eric was a Fed president who was very tuned into the banking system and concerns about the banking system. And what he essentially said is that the Federal Reserve ought to pause because of finance. He says financial crises create demand destruction, banks reduce credit availability, consumers hold off large purchases, businesses defer spending. Interest rates should pause until the degree of demand destruction can be evaluated. Guys, we have several days until the Fed has to make this choice here. And I think a big part of it will be determined by how much stress remains in the banking system. How can you tell that? Well, we'll get a picture of that today at 4:30 this afternoon when the Fed releases its weekly balance sheet. And we'll see how much takedown there's been, how much borrowing there's been at the Federal Reserve from small and medium-sized businesses. So,
okay, let's leave it at that. On there, it looks like there's a little bit, even though it's high rates, you see TLT is actually spiking higher. This looks like a rotation to maybe a flight to safety, maybe is what happening here. And gold, maybe people expecting more banks to break with this 0.5%. Maybe that's the explanation here, because you see QQQ and SPY heading down sharply on this news. You see banks heading down sharply on this news. And I got to be a little bit thankful, because this is not exactly the thesis of why I got into TLT. Maybe it is for gold. You have more bank runs that are really good for gold. But really, I was thinking the Fed is going to pause next week, which is why I piled into TLT gold. And I think the chances of a pause are much, much lower with the ECB going 0.5%. I think pretty much impossible. I think we'll see a 0.25% at least from the Fed next week at this point, unless something else keeps breaking over the weekend, which I think is entirely possible. All right, guys, be careful. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy market out there. Let's just look and see if there's any key catalysts on stocks. Catalysts that's actually worth buying, right? We haven't seen any yet today. We saw the Microsoft ChatGPT 4 yesterday. That was like the biggest catalyst in the last 2 days that we saw. Canute to announce results is going to be interesting. Man, these guys are 56 cents. They need to raise a lot of money from Walmart. Let's do it. I'm not in it, but I'm watching. And GEVO, joint development agreement with Southwest Iowa Renewable Energy. Okay, that's something that in the olden days could have moved the stock, but not nowadays. Not right now. Okay, this is not the type of catalyst you want to be playing in this market environment. All right, guys, we'll see you today at 4 p.m. for a quick post-market wrap, and get involved with the app, right? We're going to be moving for you legacy users who collaborate with me on WhatsApp. We're going to be slowly winding that down. I know the app is kind of buggy, but trying a little bit to communicate on the app, and the next release is going to make things even better and better, and we'll continue increasing our communication in the app for the benefit of all the new users coming in, right? Because all the new users coming in, we had like 35 new people join the app yesterday. They're not in our WhatsApp group. So there's a lot of new people you can collaborate with. There's like now like 55 people following XXII in our app. So you can go there, you can add nuggets, you can go into the chat for XXII and collaborate with some other people on individual stocks. So good things going to be happening with the app there. And with that, I'm out of here, and we'll see you at 4 p.m. Eastern today.